To kick us off, please welcome our CTO, Jamie McMahon. Jamie is here to help us clear the AI fog and find the best place to start your journey. Jamie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Cassandra, and welcome everyone to this year's Empower. So as Cass mentioned, we will be talking and kicking things off with AI, and I know there's probably more than a few groans in the audience because I suspect that, like many, you've heard a lot of, not noise, but lots of information, probably attended a number of sessions around AI. And so I want to make sure that for today, we're going to deliver something that's impactful but practical. With that in mind, I also know that there's probably a broad spectrum. I've seen this over the last few years where you've got people that are very early in the journey, and you've also got folks quite far advanced. And sometimes it's quite difficult to kind of thread the needle in terms of what that content's going to look like and speak to that will resonate with all of the audience. So I'm going to do my best to try and thread the needle, so to speak, and targets kind of that mid spot. So nothing right at the beginning of the journey and nothing really at the tail end of the journey from an AI perspective. So let's get into it. As Cassandra mentioned, my name is Jamie, and really what my hope to do is really take the tech out of the technology, and I really want to focus on the business impact and the ability for all of us to achieve more with our missions through the use of AI or anything else. So to start, I'm going to use this analogy, and normally when I describe this as fog. But for those of us that were impacted by that great big snowstorm that occurred just the last this past weekend, maybe this can be a snow squall or snow. And I want you to imagine yourself as this car driving through this road. You've got thick fog, you can barely see in front of you, you don't really know what's going on, where the road is, are you on the road, are you close to a ditch? Like all of those questions are kind of in your mind, and you've got some decisions to make, right? Do you go faster? Do you slow down? Do you stop? Do you pull over? Like all of these things are decisions that you need to make because your visibility is poor and you really can't see where you're going. And so if we were to flip this analogy from a technology perspective, this is really what I see. This fog is what I see most organizations kind of having to navigate right now when it comes to technology, especially because of where AI fits inside of that. Specifically, right, do we deploy AI? Do we not do something? Do we barrel ahead and really kind of go all in on AI? Do we pause? Do we do nothing and really kind of just wait for the dust to settle? This is the same type of analogy that I see. And I think the approach that businesses take is really going to depend on your individual risk tolerances, right? And what is the impact that you're looking to make through this? Are you going to go deploy? Should you speed up? Should you slow down? And I think universally, what most people are doing and what I would encourage is that to move forward, but with caution, right? With intention, with purpose. But what I would encourage not to do is don't stop, right? Don't do nothing, because if you're not looking at this, if you're not figuring out how technology is going to help you achieve your mission, then there's a risk of being left behind or being hit from behind, so to speak. And if you're just barreling ahead, there's some reward of that, but just be aware of the risks. So hopefully what we will attempt to do is, how do we create more visibility in the road ahead for us, right? How do we make it so that we can see at least more than just the taillights that we're following? Hopefully we can get to 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet of visibility to the point where maybe our destination isn't quite clear, but our journey becomes much more clear. So to frame it, because I think there's a lot of, when we hear the word AI, and especially in the context of business, it can be confusing, right? What is AI? So I'm not gonna, I think all of us here, I suspect, have used ChatGPT or Copilot, have done some prompting, maybe asked for some vacation advice or things like that. And in that capacity, it's quite effective. But when we think about it from a work point of view, it becomes less clear. And the way that we view it is there's kind of two paths that businesses and organizations should be thinking about when they look at AI. On the one path, there's productivity. And this is really all about all of us as workers, as contributors, have tasks that we do that are integral to doing our job. And from a productivity perspective, what we want to do is we want to figure out how we help make these more effective, more efficient. So I still need to do the task, but maybe I can do it faster, or maybe I can do it with more accuracy, right? That's really productivity. But there's also the innovation side. And innovation can mean a lot of things to a lot of folks. And in this context, what we really think of when we think of innovation is those same tasks that we look to make more efficient. Because of where technology is today, there's likely opportunities for us to look at that and say, well, is there a way for us to even not have to do this task, right? Can we create an opportunity where the technology performs this task that we're looking to do, and really I can focus on something else, right? And obviously there's lots of guardrails and things that we need to think about when we look at that, but that's really what we're thinking about when we're thinking about innovation. So I'm going to talk about both of these, but first let's focus on productivity, because I suspect this is where most businesses are and are thinking about when they're thinking about AI and artificial intelligence. And this is where most organizations are likely to begin their journey from an AI perspective. So where I see things right now from an AI set point of view is that most organizations, not-for-profits, are definitely in this category where you'll have pockets of people that are vigorously using AI to do a task, right? And you're going to have a few champions, a few people, maybe even you have a few licenses of Copilot, maybe you've got some folks using ChatGPT on the side, and they're individually productive, right? But when we think about it organizationally, we want to shift, we want to move from having a few folks be individually productive, and we want to move to organizational productivity, i.e., that we are using this technology with intention, with purpose. It's baked into our business workflows, into our process, and all of the folks that are in a specific job or function understand and know how to apply this technology in the context of their role and inside their work. And that's a hard leap to get to when we're moving from, okay, I know how to help it make me write an email or summarize a meeting, to, oh, it's actually going to make my job and my workflow better and more efficient. So we want to move from these early exploratory stages where, again, I suspect that most of this audience here sits in that level one, where, AI is probably not delivering true organizational value. There is likely not clear direction or use cases for AI. We might not know how to measure it, and I suspect that only a small number of our team members have some form of paid license for AI, Copilot, ChatGPT, or anything else. Right? And we want to move from that all the way over to the right, where we can recognize AI as a critical productivity driver, that we understand and we have multiple of these use cases per team. And so what does that look like? Well, I find sometimes it's the easiest to start with an example. So I've just picked this simplified workflow that I suspect everyone here has in some capacity. And it is really tough. When I was thinking about, okay, what type of an example do I want to present to this audience here? And the one thing about charities and not-for-profits is all of you do such impactful work, but it's so different, right? We can have everything from a food bank to someone that helps with medical research to something that's doing patient outreach or something. There's all sorts of a variety of what that can look like. But one thing I know is that everyone here has team members and we all go through a hiring process. So I figured this is a great place to start. And then I've got a couple of more specific examples that I think might resonate with a few of you. So when we look at this, we've got a 4-step, again, simplified interview process or talent acquisition, I think is what I described it as. And we go everything from posting the job to getting the interview until what happens after the interview. And so what I want us to focus on or think about here is, just for this part anyways, from a productivity perspective, is what about the interview phase? And if we think about the last time that everyone here may have hired someone or themselves participated in an interview, you know that there's probably things that you can do to prepare before the interview. There's the actual interview itself, where you're going to be answering questions and engaging with folks. And then you're going to be, there's activities and things that happen post-interview. And this is true of almost any business process that exists inside of your organization, where you're going to have pre, during, and post activities tied to an element of a business process. So if we look at this interview phase, I'm going to start with the step that might occur before the actual interview itself. So what if we had a tool, and again, it was, we all understood that this was part of the process, and that we engaged with AI, again, whatever your tool of choice would be. And I think, and I'll describe why I think Copilot was probably the right choice for this. But what if we were all to engage with that and ask it in a structured manner, right? I am hiring for a role. I want you, AI, to help me assess this candidate. Not assess it, sorry. I don't think we're there yet where AI, or I don't know if we ever will be there where we want AI to assess candidates for us. But we likely want them to help us think about questions to ask, or come at it from a different approach that we wouldn't be able to think about. So if we had a prompt like this that said, okay, hey, help me design an interview for someone that's going to assess this individual's hard skills, soft skills, culture fit, right? Here's the context for the role. I'm interviewing for this role. Here are our organization's values. Here is the job description. And I want you to help me build questions that is going to assess the hard skills, right? Practical, scenario-based things. I want you to think about soft skills, right? How are they behaving? How do they communicate? How do they work and interact with a team? I want you to think about culture fit, right? How do they align or contribute to our values? And how are they going to frame, how can we help them frame this as a culture add? And how can they enrich our culture versus just searching for the sameness? And for each of these, can we help me understand what are the questions I should ask, what a strong answer looks like, what are some red flags I should look out for, and help me understand what competency or behavior that question is testing. So if you look at this, you'll say, okay, that's helpful. And I understand that many businesses or many organizations likely have a syllabus of questions, standard questions they ask, and they follow that. So I want you to really think about this as just an example business process or workflow. But one thing you'll notice here is this is a very long prompt. And I suspect it is something that most folks here are not used to actually writing into Copilot when they're engaging with it, right? Because most of us have built our AI habits and we're carrying them through from previous generations of technology. And specifically, I'm talking about Google here. I suspect that most of the folks here spend a lot of the time Googling AI. And what Googling and browser searching has taught us is we don't want 10 words, 50 words, right? We probably want to focus on what are the specific keywords that I want to look for. Versus when we're talking to AI, we want to give as much context as possible, right? We want to help it understand exactly what we're looking to do. And what that actually looks like is something like this, where we have a prompt and we want to target at least 100 words, right? If there's not 100 words in a prompt, in my opinion, at least when it sits inside of a business workflow, it's not enough. It's not going to deliver results. And that, I think, also leads to many folks that may have tried AI, played around with it for a few minutes, and was like, I don't get it, right? I don't really see how this is going to make an impact in my business. I don't understand the alignment to a business process or workflow. It's because we need to think about it like this, where we're integrating it into a process, and everyone that's going to go hire is going to use this prompt or a version of this prompt to help build their questions and enrich their thinking. And if we're to go back, right, that I described the process as there's a before, during, and after, we can think that same way about all of those steps here, right? What if in the middle of the interview, again, maybe we're doing it over Teams, and we could ask Copilot in the middle of the Teams question saying, hey, I'd love you to point out or let me know if you caught any red flags or points of positive interest, right? Stuff that I think are strengths in the candidate. And are there questions that I should ask to really help figure out, okay, are these red flags actual red flags? Or are these questions that I can ask that are going to be, really help us narrow in and focus on, okay, is this strength just like a superstar? And we need to nurture and really help those strengths kind of come out. And because AI will have access to the transcript, like it's actively recording and listening to the interview, it'll have the ability to contribute and help you ask good questions of the candidate to really help you figure out, not just taking the questions we asked before, but adding the additional context of the actual interview itself and using that to inform it, right? And the reason why I think that there's an effectiveness there is because when we're using a tool like Copilot, it's going to have access to all of our organizational data that sits in Office 365. It's going to understand who we are, what we do, how we engage with our constituents, whether they be employees or folks that we help in the community, right? They're going to understand all of that, well, what makes our organization tick, and that's going to help enrich the types of questions that it's going to suggest that we answer, or that we ask, sorry. And again, I know I picked the hiring process, and this can be a bit of a touchy one because there's a lot of instances where we might not want to do this, right? We certainly don't want to use AI to assess the candidate, right? We want to make sure that we as people are the ones at the helm, that we are the ones that are just using this as a tool to help us perform that task better, right? But again, if we think about this from a process perspective, we can have things before, during, and after each of these steps in the workflow. And there's where I think we get to really true business value or true differentiation. Okay, so I talked about productivity. I want to move to innovation, right? And I think this is a swim lane that is likely going to create the largest advantage for this community here. And one of the things I think that charities and not-for-profit, the community doesn't necessarily think of is, especially now, right? I know that everyone here is probably feeling the stress. Like we've talked to all of our customers and people that we interact with in this community. We understand how pressured budgets are now, and how doing what you're doing, achieving your mission today, is 10 times more difficult, 100 times more difficult than it was just a year ago or 2 years ago. And so we really want to think about, how are we going to innovate? How are we going to rethink things so that we can do more with less, right? And that do more with less doesn't necessarily mean I want to reduce my team. It really just means I want to increase the impact that I'm making on the community, or in my mission. And so we want to, where possible, we want to take tasks that are onerous, that are repetitive, that are high friction, and if it's ready, and where AI is today, it is increasingly capable of performing higher complexity tasks, right? We need to think about AI as, today, our experience with AI, this is going to be the worst experience today, is going to be the worst experience with AI you will ever have in your life, right? If we think about where I was a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, leaps and bounds better now, and that is going to continue, right? So we need to make these decisions and assessments based on not necessarily even where the tech is today, but where we feel it's going to get to 6 months from now, 12 months from now. And that's where we get to innovation. And so we want to get beyond productivity, because productivity, quite frankly, is where every organization is going to go, right? Everyone's going to look for opportunities to make us more effective and efficient. But it's, how do we use our data? How do we use the things that are specific to our business? That's what's going to allow us to really catapult or leapfrog, our peers in terms of looking for donations or donor impact, or all of those types of things. And so we want to move from not really thinking about or using AI from a productivity perspective, and we want to move over to we have at least one of these use cases deployed in practice, so we have an understanding of what good looks like and what the art of the possible is. Because I think this swim lane here is sometimes the hardest to really think about how it's going to make a difference for your business, or connecting the ideas to how to make it a reality. So I'm going to take the same process that I described before, but I'm going to look at a different step, right? I'm going to take the screening step here. And again, I know that this is a process that we all have, but like, what if, let's say we're a very seasonal not-for-profit. Let's say we run camps for children, and as part of that, we had to hire a large number of people heading into the summer or the warm months, if we're in somewhere that has seasons. And what if we could take those interviews, or those resumes, sorry, and have AI screen them? And I don't say screen them in terms of good fit, not fit, but if it was something as simple as, this candidate has this skill. I'm looking for this skill or this specific piece of experience, and just filter it, right? Give me all of these ones, AI, read all of them and filter it down. And again, I know these tools exist. They've been out in the market for a while, and I'm using this just as an example to show that, hey, if we as a business intake lots of things, right, then we can have AI read it, interpret it, and take action on that on our behalf. We've worked with more medical oriented not-for-profits that kind of do not patient care, but work with patients, right? And one of the things that they get a lot of is doctor requisitions and doctor notes, right? And we work with them to help take all of those and turn those into lab requisitions or order forms or whatever the case may be, right? We want to look for opportunities to a task that's difficult or sometimes even hard, right? I think doctors are notorious for having terrible handwriting, and there's opportunities where AI might actually do a better job of reading that doctor's writing than a person would, because it would have a far broader range of examples for what that would look like. So again, I think that's I think there's lots and lots of opportunity here. So I'm going to move into, because I think, again, I mentioned that in this innovation swim lane, connecting the art of the possible into what this can look like can sometimes be difficult. And I wanted to focus on 4 areas where I feel that AI is actually at the point now where it can deliver real value, right? And do things at a point where it's not going to cost 7 figures, not going to cost 6 figures even, right? We're talking about things that we can deploy inside of a week. That's really what we want to focus on. We don't want these large, complicated IT projects that take months and hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? Sometimes that's going to be required, but for some of these things, we can do them really, really, really quickly. Things like translation, right? It's not surprising. This is something that would be really clearly a good thing for AI to do. But when we get to this vision and document, right, this is stuff that's rapidly getting really, really, really good, right? We want AI to be able to look at things and interpret it, right? That can be pictures, that can be maps. We work with a not-for-profit that, one of the things they do is they work with a community, and to do that, they actually need to have land. And so one of the ideas is, okay, well, we want to be able to look at a map, right? Google Maps, for example, and we want to assess areas of the community, look for churches and other parishes, things like that, that have undeveloped land. And we want to identify that based on the acreages on the map. And we want to then build a proposal to send to that church so that we can help create outreach or help achieve our mission. And we want to do that in partnership with the church. But rather than having someone, drag and drop or look up all the churches, we just want to have AI read through and look at the maps, identify those opportunities, flag them, and then we can go and take the next step from there. Right? That's a capability that is achievable and really not that difficult anymore. We also have speech, right? So speech to text, text to speech. I kind of skipped this one, but again, I think this is a really clear one. And the final one is around content and safety. So we're really looking for opportunities to say, are there things out there based on what we're doing with our mission where we are concerned about the safety of the content that we're producing, or that maybe the community is delivering back? How can we automatically look for these types of things? So lots and lots of opportunities in here to figure out ways where AI can really positively innovate inside your business. So I'll pause. I think I have time probably for 1 or 2 questions. I have been reading. I know there's some questions in the Q&A piece tied to note takers as well as certificates. So I'm going to let the team answer those because I see that the answers are in there. But there's any questions from the content, because really what I want what I hope is that everyone here can say, yeah, this has maybe changed my perspective on things, or I've got questions specific to my organization. So I have a question, Lydia, about the completed matrix for sure. There you go. No problem. Vicente, you said, did you say secure GPT in the beginning? I don't think so. I did see that question. I wasn't quite sure. I didn't say secure GPT. I would have said either like what we see most is businesses using either ChatGPT or Copilot. We have a strong opinion that Copilot delivers far higher value than ChatGPT, especially in the long run, because it's going to have the context and the ability to see all of the data that sits in your side of your Office 365 environment. Again, the assumption is that you're using Microsoft. If you're using Google, then that might change things. I would actually then recommend Gemini over ChatGPT, again, because it's going to have access to that data. There's a question there. Doesn't Copilot really run off OpenAI? Actually, it doesn't. Copilot uses a number of models, right? At the bottom, there's the LLM, which performs the function of the AI, but really it's what Microsoft does is they need to make sure it wraps around it from a privacy, from a compliance perspective. Again, you got to think about a large enterprise organization like Microsoft that has customers in all sorts of regions and areas of the world, and they need to make sure these tools have the ability to operate in those from a compliance perspective, right? So that they follow the rules, whether that's the California Privacy Act or GDPR in Europe or whatever the case may be. I see a couple of tool questions, nonprofit CRMs. There's probably a takeaway question. Perplexity. I think Perplexity is great. Again, all of these things are just tools. I really want to focus on the use case. So if there's any questions, I will be hanging around in the back. I did want to make sure I had a chance to answer some of these, but I do want to talk about what's next. So there's a few things. Again, I understand that there's a lot of not-for-profits here, a lot of charities delivering really high value to your communities. One of the things that we hear often from folks is, okay, we attended something like this, and I'd really love you to kind of deliver this or a similar message to my board or to my leadership team, because we want to create alignment across the board. So obviously we can't make this offer to everyone on this call. I think that would be very difficult, but we are going to have do host a raffle for 5 lucky winners to have a private executive briefing session similar to this, except I do it a little bit differently when we go on from a one-to-one perspective, and Cassandra can kind of walk us through what that might look like. But before I do that, the second thing I do want to talk about is the notion of an AI prototype. So I mentioned before where we really want to look at things in an agile capacity. We don't want to spend weeks or months, deploying this stuff. We want to get to this stuff in days. And some of the ways that we think about that is, how do we get to a prototype as quickly as possible? And so we do have a program where we work with businesses to do that inside of 3 days. Sometimes that 3 days can extend to a week or 2 weeks, but really no more than that, because we want to get to a point where we can assess the value of it as quickly as possible. So I'll say, Cassandra, anything else to add on either of these two things?
All good. You will be receiving the email with all of these details, so you can read it calmly at your own time. We are going to move forward to the second session, and then at the end of the event, I will come back to all of these offers. So more on that there. Thank you so much, Jamie. We really appreciate your talk. And now we feel that the path through the fog feels much clearer. So thank you again.